You're listening to the Unsure Entrepreneur Podcast with Roger Pierce. Whether you're scribbling business ideas on a napkin or wrestling with the should I, shouldn't I question, get ready to explore the realities, the risks, and the rewards of entrepreneurship as we share the stories, scars, and successes of small business owners.
Hello and welcome. My name is Roger Pierce, and you're listening to the Unsure Entrepreneur Podcast. I'm thrilled to introduce Andrew Jenkins, my first guest. Hello, Andrew.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you here. I'm going to give them a bit of your background so we know who we're talking to.
Sure.
Andrew, a longtime friend, is CEO of Volterra Social, professional services firm specializing in social media and social selling strategies. He's based here in Toronto, Canada, and he's the former head of social media strategy for Royal Bank and has worked with a diverse list of companies in North America and Europe, including CIBC, Rogers, and Bell. He's a regular international speaker and a panelist at numerous industry conferences and events, and he teaches a course on social media strategies for the enterprise at the University of Toronto's School of Continuing Studies. And most recently, he's the author of the book, Social Media Marketing for Business, Scaling an Integrated Social Media Strategy Across Your Organization. Wow. Welcome, Andrew.
Thank you. Great to be here.
And we look forward to your insights. So as you know, our aim here today is to get you to share your personal journey into entrepreneurship and your experiences starting and running a successful business so that other aspiring entrepreneurs can better understand the path to opening a business and what life is really like as an entrepreneur. We want the nitty gritty. So just a heads up, I'm going to poke and prod you a bit to get to the good stuff.
Okay, I've been warned.
And we've got just 30 minutes together, so please keep your answers brief as possible. And let's get into it.
Sounds good.
So let's go to the origins of Andrew and Volterra Social. What inspired you to start this business, and how did the journey begin?
Well, it was sort of organic, and actually, it was Volterra is my second foray into entrepreneurship, but the first attempt bears some influence on it. I started my own e-commerce company selling menswear on the internet I had finished film school in 1993, and a friend of mine from film school was building websites. And the internet was just emerging then. And I saw something in this emerging internet and websites, and I was intrigued. And so, fast forward to 95, I had worked in the film and television industry for a bit, and it wasn't getting the traction that I was hoping for. But I saw this internet thing, and I was like, it struck my curiosity. And so with two other people, we started this e-commerce business selling menswear on the internet. But this was 1995. I like to call it 1995 BG before Google, because Google hadn't come out yet. And taking credit card transactions over the web was foreign territory, even for the banks. They were reluctant to back those sorts of activities. So after a year and a half of just money going out and not much money coming back in, shut it down. But what I learned from that whole process led to working for e-commerce software companies and just diving into the deep end of the emerging internet and e-commerce. And that has led to my staying in the internet and technology space for now, soon to be 30 years. Fast forward to 2008, I'm coming off a 3-year stint at Bell Canada in wireless technologies, again, still in the technology space. And I had always wanted to get into strategy consulting after I had finished my MBA. And a friend had an opportunity for me to do a management consulting project. And that was my first sort of validation of being paid for, how I think. And then never looked back. But the next project after that initial consulting engagement was another consulting engagement, but it had some research embedded in it. and that was with the National Endowment for Science, Technology, and the Arts, or NESTA, in the UK. And I was hired to do research on all of the predominant social networks at that time. And some may recall that Facebook was not number one then. MySpace was, and MySpace doesn't even exist anymore. So it just speaks to the changing landscape. So that first project was the catalyst to all the work that we do now in social media. And the last thing I'll say about it is it evolved from that research engagement to doing strategy engagements for social media. And after a series of those engagements where we would go in, do some situational analysis, make strategic recommendations, and then watch clients not execute or do it quite poorly or be challenged to execute themselves, we said, would you like us to do it for you if it was priced appropriately? And they said, oh, could you? And that is how, again, this wasn't written down in a business plan. This speaks to the organic nature that I described earlier. That's how our business has evolved to predominantly being retainer-based, outsourced social media management, because a lot of companies don't have the skill set in-house or simply just sufficient resources. And so we come in as an extension of their marketing team.
And I mean, you are my go guy and a lot of people's go-to guy for social media and increasingly AI expertise, Andrew, but you're becoming a side hustle on that. Can you give me an insight? Give me examples of exactly the kind of work you do for clients so the audience understands?
Sure. So to clarify, we only do social. We don't build websites. We don't do anything to do with SEO. We don't do email marketing. Not that there's anything wrong with those. We've just chosen to do one thing and do it very well. And as well, we've found most organizations where they're challenged from a digital marketing standpoint, it's with respect to social media, because social is always on. You have to be dealing with it every day. You build a website, that's a project. SEO, that can be predominantly a project with a little bit of tweaking after the fact. Email marketing, unless you're a major, a big box retailer, you're probably not sending out emails to your customer base or prospect base every day. But social's on every day. And that's where most companies fall down on the ability to establish and maintain a social presence and creating and distributing content on a daily basis. So we focus on creating content for them, curating third-party content, trying to help them work smarter rather than harder, so that, if we're writing a blog, we write a couple blogs a month for clients, we might have a 30-minute conversation over Zoom. Well, we'll record that conversation, and so I like to say we're killing three birds with one stone. The interview will help us create blogs from the discussion. We can take from the video and the audio, we can create video clips and audiograms as well.
I love it. I love how efficient you are with these things. A 30-minute interview, and you're slicing and dicing all these different pieces of content.
Well, content is the beast that must be fed.
And back to what you said earlier, and I think this is a lesson for anyone out there thinking of starting a business, is you were very clear in your introduction and explanation about what you don't do. We don't do this, we don't do marketing, we don't do trade design. You're very clear and focused. What's the power in that? How is that a good thing for a new small business?
Well, let me clarify that by saying we came to that conclusion or that circumstance through a lot of mistakes. There have been numerous digital projects that we've done. Oh, can you do this? Yeah, we can do that. Or yes, because it meant making payroll, or it meant, oh, my bills were paid that month because. And the other thing to think about is I used to do a lot of projects and you would sell a project, execute, get paid, and then you had to turn your attention to business development to land the next project. So you had this hills and valleys of revenue. And so gradually you learn through the abuse of entrepreneurship that the sooner you can get to predictable revenue, and this is how we arrived at retainer based. So we now are to the point where the bulk of our revenue is predictable. I sign a contract with a client, and they are committing to a minimum of 6 months with us because social, even with SEO and building websites and so on, it takes 6 months before you really are up and running and have an impact. And if the client doesn't have the patience for that, then it's probably not a good fit for us. But early on, yeah, it was going from project to project to project, and all the volatility and stress related to that. Now to the point where we have retainer-based clients. We have some clients that have been with us for multiple years that we continue to service with content on a monthly basis. But also, we report on the impact we've had so that we're proving the value that we're providing.
So many things are to unpack, and I love it all because you're a great illustration of a successful entrepreneur. For people that don't understand this, remember, someone listening might go, "Whoa, cash flow and retainer clients, what's the value in that?" And I know, coming from a project-based marketing agency, stupidity, explain the power of that retainer and the cash flow and consistent revenue for a new
Well,
entrepreneur.
so I used to teach entrepreneurship and business model design at OCAD University, another university here in Toronto, before I was teaching at the University of Toronto. And periodically, we would run a workshop, myself and another teaching colleague there, for the master's students that were graduating from a master's program in strategic foresight and design, because many of them would hang out a shingle as a consultant. And we would come to a section in our presentation, and I referred to it as know your number. And I would work it back saying, there are 365 days in a year. Take away the weekends and X number of weeks that you want to have a vacation. That's the number of days that you can be selling and the number of days that you can be delivering on what you've sold if you are a consultant or doing any project base. And so that's like 200 and some days, 212 or something like that. And then you figure out, okay, so how much do I want to make in a given year? Okay, so let's say it's just $100,000 for easy math. That means I have to bill X, whatever, do the math, X amount of dollars per day to meet that gross revenue. And so suddenly the picture becomes clear, like, oh, well, you're not going to be delivering every single day because you got to be selling.
Right.
Or you're doing double duty.
Yeah.
And suddenly you realize, oh, that means that if I'm only delivering 50% of the time, that means I have to double what I'm charging on the days I'm delivering. And unless you do this sort of back of the napkin math, you can undersell. And side note, recently, my son helped a friend of his who had left nursing to start her own cake baking business, deliver a cake that took an hour to drive to deliver it. And anyway, probably ended up losing $200 on selling a cake based on the time it took. And my son was the one who drove her to deliver it, not counting his time, the gas, like he just did it as a gesture. And it's like, we've all made those mistakes where we didn't do the math. And so that's one of the reasons we went the retainer based. Our value proposition is that we're providing enterprise grade tools and methods at an SME or small business price point, or less than a full-time headcount. I almost want it to be a bit of a no-brainer for our clients. Like, you can't hire someone for what we're charging to get a full agency.
I love it. And you hit another topic. We could talk for hours about this stuff, but outsourcing, that is a huge trend that's gone on for decades now. And that's the economy. Entrepreneurs need to realize that. You don't have to develop a full service agency. You can come up with some little service that helps people out who don't want to maybe hire internally or don't have the bandwidth to do it themselves, right?
I don't have anyone on payroll. They're all a core team that I've worked with for a number of years. And we do paid social media campaigns, but we don't do it every day.
Mhm.
So I'm not going to have someone just sitting around twiddling their thumbs waiting for the next paid campaign.
Yeah, I love it.
But I have my go-to person that, once a quarter, hey, so I'm applying the same methodology that I'm hoping my clients are applying, which is you pull in the talent when you need it and pay appropriately.
It's such a great business model, and I love the fact that you're charging a retainer. I'm a big fan of subscription-based businesses or retainer-based businesses. That's what every app in the world does, right? It's subscription. Everyone wants that kind of model.
Well,
Recurring revenue, predictable cash flow. That's how you build a business, isn't it?
well, selfishly, when and if I ever choose to sell the business, it will sell based on contracted revenue. My brother ran a landscaping business for 20 plus years. It was hugely successful, but his contracts went to zero every year because they were seasonal contracts.
Right, right.
So great when it was running and people knew consistently, well, you know, Dave's going to show up every spring to sign the new, and he had corporate clients. They did salting and snow plowing during the winter, and then they would do grass cutting and landscaping and like groundskeeping in the summer. But when it came to selling the business, it was selling the equipment. That was it because all the contracts had reset it to zero, and that's not it's not like a mistake he had made. That was just the nature of that kind of business.
Yeah.
And
No,
so I look at, um, I want to have a portfolio of long-standing clients that if someone wanted to acquire the business, like, oh, okay, then there's a reasonable forecasted revenue that they can anticipate if they wanted to take it over.
very smart. I love it. So on the subject of money, can you share with us how you got the funds together to get the business going?
Self-funded.
Okay,
It's
just
just,
out of personal savings?
well, yeah, it's just, sold the first contract and it was, lucrative enough. And then just I'll be fully transparent. Like being married and having a partner that could help smooth out some of the spikes, but fully transparent. It could there were numerous periods of time that were highly stressed, wondering where the next project was going to come from and paying bills and so on. And I've arrived organically at the situation I'm at where I've got a nice sizable stream of recurring revenue, but it was bumpy. I won't lie. It was bumpy getting here.
And but I love that conversation because you don't, I tell entrepreneurs when I'm ever talking to upstarts, you don't need $100,000 unless you're trying to open up a store or something silly or a restaurant, which is not a good idea. But, you don't need a ton of money to get going in a business. Some entrepreneurs get going with a consulting firm for less than $1,000, right? You
Yeah.
need a computer and a phone and the internet, and away you go, and a website.
I'm about to launch a new line of business, and I'm slapping up a single web page to have people to introduce the concept of the business and ask people to sign up for the waiting list.
Hmm,
And just
brilliant.
to get a gauge of interest, I can get a logo made for less than, if the domain was $40. It'll be owned by my existing corporation. And so, but over time, I have a corporation and it's several $1,000s a year in accounting.
Yeah.
And I'm spending several $1,000s a year on insurance because we are a services company. We are given the control over our clients' social media accounts. So there's exposure from a liability and risk and so on. So, but to your point about getting started, the services company is probably one of the easiest to start because you're paid for your time. So it's highly profitable, or can be, depending on how much you want to charge.
In talking to entrepreneurs, you talk about what I would call minimum viable product. So here you are introducing a new division or product line. And you're wisely just putting up a web page, like you said, $40, not much. Talk about the importance of that. You don't need to jump in full feet, quit your job necessarily to get into business, do you? You can do what you've done and try it out first. Test the waters.
Well, this idea, and the idea is, so we do social media management for companies. But increasingly, and in addition to that, I do a lot of training of the use of LinkedIn and social selling techniques to financial advisors, mortgage specialists, entrepreneurs, and sales teams. But after all these years of the kind of training, it's the old adage. Frankly, it's every bit of training that's ever been done for companies. You have 100 people in the room. 20 of them are going to take everything that they learned and they're going to start executing, the first day after the training, and they're going to stick with it. A whole bunch of people, in the middle of the bell curve will dabble. Some of it will stick with it, but again, not consistently or at a low volume. And then others will like, yeah, that was fine. I got 2 days away from work for training, and they'll never do it. And so that experience led me to believe that to come up with an offering for, and this is not meant to as a pitch to your audience, this idea of social media management for solopreneurs, senior leaders within an organization, where we curate content on their behalf and they can share it, or the next level of the service is we curate content, gets approved, and we share it for you. And so that we keep your social presence active and vibrant, and we let the individual do their own commenting and that kind of thing. But the challenge has always been for them, similar to companies, to establish and sustain their own social media presence. So we're rolling out a program, and we're beta testing with a few folks to curate and distribute content for them as individuals. And the platinum version of it will be that once a month we interview them for 30 minutes. And we take the 30-minute discussion and we turn that into video clips and audiograms.
Great service. Look forward to seeing that roll out after you prove the concept with your test. I love it. Very smart.
Yeah. So we'll see. I mean, but this, to go back to your question, or this idea of it's a kernel of an idea based on accumulated experience from client engagements. It's the cliche. I suspect I see an unmet need. And so I'm developing a service and testing it out to see if there's enough people like that would say, yeah, I have that problem in that area that I would love help with.
Watch what your customers want and respond. Might be a whole new business stream there for you. I love it.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. I'm just watching the clock here. I want to get to some more questions for you because I know there's so much we got to cover. But what do you love most, Andrew, about being an entrepreneur, and what do you, in all honesty, hate about this life?
The what I love most is the autonomy. I've worked for numerous corporations, and right now we're seeing in the news all these layoffs from even the likes of a Google and a Microsoft and so on. And I've worked for startups and I've worked for big corporations. I worked for Bell Canada, our largest telecom. I worked there for 3 years. My father worked there for 33. The promise of a career for life with any one company just isn't there. And that's not a criticism of the company. That's just the nature of the environment. And so and just my nature, I like new, I like being excited by my work. And when I worked in a corporate environment, the excitement wanes pretty fast. But that's me. And I'm not criticizing people. If someone is content and wants and has the opportunity to work for a company for 20 some years and is happy, kudos to you. The happy is the important part. That wasn't me. I now have a team of people that work around me. And so if I want to, like for instance, I have a call today from 12:30 to 1:30, and then I'm going to go for a 5K walk in the beautiful sunshine that it is today. But then tonight, probably from 10 o'clock till midnight, I'll do some work. But that's my choice, and I have the freedom and the flexibility to do that. And one of my goals with the business is to be able to run it from anywhere in the world. I've taught my class at U of T from my hotel room in Cancun, Mexico. So I find that one of the best perks that I could dream of. The downside is that, all this freedom and flexibility I have is because I didn't have freedom and flexibility in the early days of building my business.
Right.
I made some sacrifices. I made mistakes. I made costly decisions, personally and professionally, in getting here, and sometimes many of them unforeseen. So, and I have children. They didn't get as much time with me as perhaps they deserved. So those are all things you need to consider. Or maybe I shouldn't say maybe. I know I should have done a better job of work-life balance. I'm trying to do that more now. And like I said, taking a break to go for a walk in the sunshine. One, I mean, everyone should do it, but even if you're working for a corporation, is take that mental break that you need. So that I would highlight is just, you know, be mindful of the sacrifices you're making and make sure that it's worth it. But, what's the end goal in mind? And, my father retired from Bell Canada at 53 and consulted for a number of years after that. I'm already past his age and I'm not retired. So I look at my idea of retirement is going to be different. And I'm fortunate that I have a digital marketing company where I can foreseeably keep running it for a number of years and run it from anywhere and feel sort of semi-retired. We'll see.
Well, I think that answers one of my last questions too, which was what's your advice for someone who is the very, very beginning of this journey, thinking about it, unsure, that's the name of the podcast, sitting on the fence. What do you say to someone like that?
One of my favorite books is a book by Richard Branson called Losing My Virginity, about his journey starting the Virgin brand. And he had his attitude in the book that was very clear was, as long as he could manage the downside, when he was thinking about a major decision and what the possible implications or outcomes would be, his thought was, can I manage the downside? Can I manage if it doesn't go the way I hoped or expected? And if he was confident that he could, he would do it. And so, in the book, he talks about the inaugural flight of Virgin Air was a Monday. And the Friday before, they had one plane. And the Friday before the inaugural flight of said plane, of the new airline, they had an engine failure on that plane.
Oh, gosh.
And they had to get, to the tune of £500,000, a brand new Rolls-Royce jet engine installed for Monday. And he found the money through his connections and so on. And they made it happen. And even just the way he had this intuitive, he could see a situation, like he started Virgin Records by selling records by mail. And he just had this innate way of saying, okay, I've got records. There's this student magazine that he started with a magazine first, and maybe I can marry the two ideas. Can I advertise in the magazine to get people to subscribe to records? And it just put the two and two together. He wasn't certain that it was going to make money, and it did. And that's how Virgin Records started. But it's to some that's sounds really risky, but dip your toe in the water, test some ideas, ask a few friends and family, would you buy this? In this day and age with the internet and so on, you can throw up a web page and say, sign up for the waiting list and say, here's 100 people that are interested in what I'm thinking about offering. Can you make enough money from 100 people? Hopefully you can.
Test the idea first. And unfortunately, that's all the time we have, but I do want to give another plug to Andrew's terrific book here, Social Media Marketing for Business. I think you can get it on Amazon, right, Andrew?
Yes, or koganpage.com.
koganpage.com. It's a great read. It's a must-read handbook for anyone trying to navigate those choppy social media waters.
Not to plug the book so much, but for some people think, because it's talking about, if it gives them the impression it's only for big business, there's a great chapter on LinkedIn and personal branding. And even if you're a solopreneur, there's a lot of value. And as well, there's helpful stuff in the book for as you grow too.
I love it. I liked it so much, I've got 3 copies.
Wow. Thank you.
Andrew, I want to thank you very much for sharing your entrepreneurial journey with us here today. It means a lot to me and our listeners.
Happy to join you. It was great fun. Thank you.
Before you go, if a listener wants to connect with you, what's the best way to reach you?
You can find me on LinkedIn. Send me a message and say, if you reach out to connect, just let me know that you heard me on the podcast.
Excellent. And I'm sure they will. And to our listeners, thank you very much for being here. And be sure to return for more insights from the unsure entrepreneur. Thanks again, Andrew. Thanks, everybody.
That's it for this episode of the Unsure Entrepreneur podcast. Thanks for listening. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss other candid conversations with small business owners. And be sure to check us out at unsureentrepreneur.com.